The first time little Zarya tried to stand in the bright morning light, her knees folded like paper, and the sound of her fall echoed louder than the traffic outside the window. It was the kind of sound that makes adults freeze, the kind that carries years of helplessness in a single second. Doctors had called it permanent. Specialists with marble offices and glowing machines had said her legs would never carry her weight. And yet, in that sunlit room, a tired single father watched something in her eyes refuse to accept that sentence. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet miracles that don't come with headlines, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Wave. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. Hassan Malik had never planned to be anyone's hero. He was a single dad to an 8-year-old boy named Ilyas, working long shifts as a city bus mechanic. His days began with grease under his fingernails and ended with homework spread across a kitchen table that still smelled faintly of engine oil. Life had stripped him down to essentials after his wife passed away years earlier, leaving him with grief, responsibility, and a deep understanding of how fragile normalcy could be. He didn't believe in miracles because believing had once hurt too much. He believed in effort, routine, and showing up even when it felt pointless. Zarya and her mother, Samreen Qureshi, lived 2 floors below Hassan in the same aging apartment building. Samreen was raising her daughter alone after an accident shattered both her marriage and her child's future in a single afternoon. Zarya had been 4 when a speeding delivery truck ran a red light. She survived, but the damage to her spine left her unable to walk. The doctors were thorough, expensive, and coldly efficient. They promised the best care money could buy, and then quietly admitted there were limits even wealth couldn't cross. Samreen sold her jewelry, borrowed from relatives, and spent nights scrolling through miracle cures until exhaustion took over. Each morning came with the same reality, lifting her daughter from bed, into a chair, into a world that wasn't built for her. Hassan first noticed Zarya during daylight hours when the building's power went out and everyone spilled into the stairwell to escape the heat. She sat quietly in her wheelchair, fingers tracing patterns on the armrest while other children ran past her in a blur of movement. There was no self-pity in her face, just a distant watching, as if she were studying a life she wasn't invited to enter. Something about that stillness stayed with him. Maybe it was because he recognized it, the look of someone who had learned too early how to be patient with pain. Days passed, and routine stitched their lives together in small ways. Hassan fixed Samreen's broken door hinge. Samreen watched Ilyas when Hassan worked late. Zarya began to smile when she heard Hassan's heavy footsteps on the stairs. The building was always brighter in the daytime, sunlight bouncing off peeling paint and cracked tiles, and it was in that ordinary brightness that something quietly extraordinary began to form. Hassan wasn't a doctor. He had no medical training beyond first aid posters in the bus depot. But he knew machines, pressure, balance, and the way small adjustments could change everything. One afternoon, while repairing an old office chair for Ilyas, he noticed how the seat height and angle affected posture. The thought struck him gently at first, then with growing insistence. What if support, not force, was what Zarya needed? What if strength had to be taught back to muscles one whisper at a time? He started reading late at night, not miracle cures, but physiology, physical therapy. Basics, stories of slow recoveries that never made the news. He used scrap wood, foam, and straps from the depot to build makeshift supports. Everything was careful, measured, and reversible. He never promised anything. He only asked Samreen if she would let him try something simple during the daytime when they could all see clearly and stop the moment it felt wrong. Samreen agreed because hope, even fragile hope, was lighter than despair. They began in the brightest room of Hassan's apartment, windows open, dust floating like tiny stars in the sun. Zarya was supported upright for seconds at a time, her feet touching the floor, weight distributed so gently it barely registered. Her muscles trembled, then relaxed. Hassan watched her breathing more than her legs, learning her limits the way a mechanic listens to an engine's strain. Weeks passed. Daylight became their ally. Mornings were best, when Zarya was rested and the city hummed softly below. There were setbacks. Some days she couldn't bear the effort. Some days Samreen cried in the kitchen while pretending to rinse dishes. Hassan never pushed. He adjusted. He rebuilt. He learned that progress was not a straight line but a quiet accumulation of moments where giving up was postponed. Billionaire doctors had offered machines worth more than Hassan's lifetime earnings. They had offered polished words and carefully managed expectations. What they couldn't offer was time without a ticking clock, attention without invoices, or belief that didn't depend on charts. Hassan offered all three without realizing their value. The first real change was almost invisible. Zaria's foot pressed into the floor with intention. Not reflex, not accident, but choice. Samreen noticed it first, then doubted her own eyes. Hassan said nothing, only nodded and adjusted the support slightly lower. The room seemed to hold its breath in the daylight as if the walls themselves didn't want to scare the moment away. Strength returned unevenly, like a memory half remembered. Zaria's legs learned again what they were meant for. It hurt. There were tears, not dramatic, but quiet ones that slid down her cheeks and disappeared into her collar. Hassan taught her to rest without quitting. Samreen learned to watch without interfering, hands clenched, heart racing. Neighbors began to notice Zaria spending less time in her wheelchair during the day. Whispers followed. Someone suggested calling a doctor. Someone else warned against false hope. Hassan listened and kept going. He measured improvement in breaths taken without fear, in seconds added to standing time, in the way Zaria laughed when she realized she was taller than the table again. The day everything changed was ordinary by every visible standard. Sunlight poured through the windows. The city outside moved on, unaware. Hassan had adjusted the supports lower than ever before. Zaria stood with only his hands hovering nearby, not touching. Samreen watched from the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, afraid to blink. Zaria shifted her weight. Her legs wobbled, then steadied. She took one step, then another. The sound of her feet on the floor was soft, but it shattered years of certainty. Samreen's knees gave out before Zaria's ever did. She collapsed to the floor, tears pouring freely, a sound escaping her that was part sob, part prayer, part disbelief. For the first time since the accident, her child was walking toward her in the full light of day. There were doctors later. Tests, scans, explanations that tried to make sense of what had happened. They spoke of neural pathways, plasticity, delayed responses. They used careful language to protect their authority. Hassan didn't argue. He didn't need credit. He only knew that patience, consistency, and love had done what money and machines could not. Zaria didn't become a runner overnight. Recovery continued, slow and demanding. But every step she took rewrote the story she had been handed at 4 years old. Samreen's tears that day became something else entirely. Gratitude replaced grief. Fear loosened its grip. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that real change often happens quietly and in the daylight, please take a moment now to like, share, and engage with this video. Your interaction helps spread these moments of hope further than you might imagine. Just before the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment one word that this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. Hassan returned to his routine. Grease, buses, homework, mornings that began too early. But something in the building had shifted. People smiled more. They helped without being asked. Zaria walked down the stairs holding her mother's hand, sunlight following them like a promise. And in a world obsessed with loud miracles, a single dad proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone is time, belief, and the courage to try again when everyone else has stopped.